get this started. So, great, here we go. Good afternoon, folks. My name is Abby Getman-Skillicorn. I'm on the Massachusetts Farm to School team, and we're delighted to have you here to learn about responding to school solicitations. Barrett and Lonnie, is my screen showing the slide deck appropriately? Okay,
Yes.
excellent. Despite repeated attempts, here we go. So for today's conversation, Mass Farm to School really wants to, certainly introduce you to our panelists. We have exceptional professionals on the raising food and serving delicious school meals. And we want to do a brief overview of what school meals are and parameters around school meals. They certainly have changed in the past number of decades. How schools and vendors make purchasing decisions. This is important for you as a farmer or a food business to understand how schools might make decisions, evaluate if school sales are really right for you, and then talk more about responding to solicitations, technical assistance opportunities you can have, and certainly allow time for questions and answers. Because today is a webinar, we are not using the chat function in the Zoom. What you will want to do if you have questions is go to the Q&A button. If you don't see it on the bottom banner of your screen, if you go to where it says more and it's a circle with 3 dots, there is a Q&A in the drop down, and you can use that to certainly put in any questions that you have that you are thinking about throughout today's presentation, and I'll do the best I can to stay on top of those questions as we're moving through the presentation, or we'll cover them at the very end. So with that, thanks for joining us. I would love to introduce Lonnie Austin and Barrett Grazioso for joining me today. Lonnie, do you want to say hello to our crowd and tell us a little bit about yourself?
Hi, I am Lonnie Austin. I'm actually from Belchertown, Mass. I'm a farmer that has been affected with and supported for the farm to school. Yeah, I'm just excited to be here and look forward to what questions everybody has.
Awesome. And Barrett?
Yes, I'm currently working as a chef educator for Project Bread. Formerly, I was the food service director here in Belchertown as well. And Lonnie and I have worked together over the years. We procured beef from Lonnie's farm and served it to the students. So also very happy to be here today.
Thank you both. So for those of you who are less familiar with us, Massachusetts Farm to School, we're an over 20-year-old organization that's really looking to strengthen local farms and fisheries and promote healthy communities by increasing local foods in schools and learning opportunities for students. And we do this through a variety of ways. We do it through our professional learning opportunities, like today's webinar. We also hold these for school nutrition professionals and educators. We provide different networking opportunities, including our statewide conference, which will be taking place in March of 2026 at Smith College in Northampton, Massachusetts. And we work on different policy and advocacy initiatives, which I'll talk about a little bit later. And as you can see on the screen in front of you, we also have a communications and marketing program called the Harvest of the Month, and it has 20 different crops or food items that schools have available to them that are in wide abundance throughout Massachusetts. And this is a marketing strategy where we tie both curricular education materials for educators as well as for school nutrition professionals, scalable recipes, et cetera, that they can use when they're buying local foods and then celebrating them in their school communities. And with that, Barrett, can you tell us a little bit about Project Bread, which is the organization that you're representing today?
Sure. So Project Bread's been around for 40 years, and they work, on food insecurity. Basically, they have a radical approach to ending hunger. You can go to the next slide. And they do it through policy, prevention, and partnership. I'm one of their new chef educators, and so my role is really to go in and work with schools, creating recipes, working on from scratch, really trying to make the connection between good food, nutrition, and health. And so we do have a hotline number that's on the next slide. Right now, we have a lot of families in Massachusetts looking for and hoping to find some answers to questions regarding the issues with SNAP. And so this is a great resource. Cannot say enough about the staff that lines these that is behind the lines to answer questions.
Thanks, Barrett. And yes, there's definitely the hotline is awesome and it is available in multiple languages. So in the
Yes.
event that you or someone you know could benefit from finding out about a food pantry or a meal site near them, in addition to support around SNAP benefits, this is a great number to call. So with that, Lonnie, do you want to tell us more about Austin Ridge Acres?
Well, we are first-time farmers. I personally am a first-time farmer. My husband's a 5th generation. We're located in Belchertown, and we came across the opportunity to be a part of, the farm to schools by my relationship with Barrett. It's been great. We've gone for the last 2 years. I work with 3 different districts. We've definitely supplied a fair amount of product to the schools in the area, and yeah, it's been enjoyable, and we look forward to being able to do more of it.
Awesome. And so, to summarize, like, yeah, you've been working with, it started off with Belchertown.
Yeah,
After Barrett won a terrific tray of the month, which is
this
an
is true.
project that I'll talk about a little bit later, different districts learned like, oh, there's great wholesale local beef available. I want to be able to get some of that. And then, through that marketing, campaign, you were able to get some more sales. I was
Absolutely.
I was really impressed when I was at an event in Chicopee in the spring of 2024 when Chicopee was sharing that they were sourcing your beef, that Senator Oliveira was like, that's where I get my meat share from. And so it was affirming to, elected officials, this food is good enough for my family, and it's certainly good enough for our public school students as well.
Absolutely.
So school meals, if you have any students that are in public schools, they participate in a federal child nutrition program, most easily known as the National School Lunch Program or the National School Breakfast Program. Different communities also offer the Summer Food Service Program, of which Project Bread also does a tremendous amount of support in promoting and making sure families know that they have access to free summer meals when schools are out. And in Massachusetts, we have universal free school meals so that every student can eat at no cost. And what that means is that more schools want to buy local foods because they're serving more meals than ever before. These meals are funded through federal and state reimbursements, and they do have nutritional requirements to provide meat or proteins, dairy, fruits and vegetables. And those nutritional requirements also include sodium, fat, and sugar limitations. So ketchup is no longer a vegetable. Fried foods have been eliminated from school meals for decades. And we have, over the past number of years, there's been a real strong initiative to bring back scratch cooking, which Barrett, had mentioned previously. And in order to do so, in some of our school kitchens, they need to do equipment repairs or expansions. They need to do more staff training. We've de-invested in culinary education in schools. And so Barrett's part of the Project Bread team that really brings culinary education back to the school kitchen so that staff are really equipped and capable and confident in how to make more delicious meals. As a note, especially for farmers and food producers, private schools may also have meal programs and they can be phenomenal partners, but they don't necessarily have the same federal and state nutrition standards or procurement requirements. So some of the details that we might talk about today is really focused on if you are planning to sell to public schools that are running child nutrition programs and are part of the Commonwealth's Department of Elementary and Secondary Education. So as far as the nutrition standards, and Barrett, chime in when you want, like the top photo on the right is of one of your fabulous lunch trays that is featuring some of the Austin Ridge Acres beef. But meals in school look really different than when I was in public school in the 90s. And they really are working towards incorporating many more fresh foods, scratch cooking as much as possible, and also just like dynamic, colorful meals.
Mhm.
Gone are the beige lunch trays of
Right.
yesterday.
And I will say a big push, not only are people more interested in eating healthier, but as a school, we get our reimbursements from participation. So how can we boost participation? Well, we can offer these options, which not only the parents feel good about, their kids eating school lunch, the kids enjoy knowing that they might know the farmer. I will use Lonnie as an example. I happen to have my office in the school at the time when we first started serving the beef, and so many of the kids know Lonnie's farm, and know that this is something that is right down the street from them. So that connection is huge. Um, and that was one of our taco days, using local beef. And I will tell you, the smell in the schools when we were cooking this beef versus our classic traditional USDA commodity beef, um, night and day, night
Yeah.
and day. Yeah. And on those days, we also had a lot of teacher participation.
That's right, Barrett. And so Barrett highlights that school nutrition programs operate outside of your school community's budget. They have to be standalone. They have to be self-sustaining in their program operations. So all of the food, labor, overhead costs, et cetera, has to be covered by that federal nutrition rate that Barrett was mentioning, which is over $4 for most schools. In some higher need communities, it's still in the $4 range, but more like 4.30, 4.38. And so in order to do that and to do that well, it does also take a lot of creativity, and school nutrition directors want to be serving delicious, wholesome meals that are attracting more students to eat, because when they have, more participation, that means that they can have more discretionary funding that must be put back into the nutrition program and can be put back into the local economy. School meals have a Buy American requirement, and it's it's incumbent on on all of us to be participating in our local food economy, and schools have really been championing that work for a number of years. And we're excited to have some data behind the types of foods that schools are really looking to source. And because we have universal free school meals, nutrition directors know if the legislature and the Commonwealth of Massachusetts, if our taxpayers are working to fund these wholesome school meals, we want those funds to also be going back to Massachusetts farmers as well. With that, there are a couple of different types of food service departments that commonly operate in Massachusetts. Some are called self-operated food service departments, and these are, in situations like Barrett was in Belchertown, where she was a municipal employee of the school district. And so the food service operations are handled within district. There's more local control on purchasing. But there can also be limited staff capacity. And municipal public servants are making the decisions for students. And that's one of the great ways that school meals are coming to your students. And another way that some municipalities choose to operate is they hire food service management companies, and they have food service management companies on contract that are really the outsourced entity, the outsourced contractors that are inside your school buildings, making the school meals. And so districts choose to contract, with food service management companies for expertise or collective buying power or cash incentives or external liability. They don't want to have, food safety liability under their umbrella. They can contract that out. But because of that, when working with food service management companies, there are corporate decisions being made from further away. They can often be less flexible. There may be more rigorous or more cumbersome procurement processes in order for farms or food businesses to begin selling through a food service management company. And food service management companies are for-profit corporations making decisions for students. So on the picture in front of you, you see one of Belchertown Public Schools' delicious lunch trays that was featuring local delicata squash with some of the scratch-made beef stroganoff from Austin Ridge Acres. So pretty delicious. Was one of those days Barrett was mentioning where
Yeah.
folks
Yep.
were streaming down to the cafeteria. And Barrett, on that note, was there anything else you wanted to mention when you're talking about kind of the self-operated versus food service management companies? Because you have colleagues
Yeah.
in many of those with all of those hats on.
Interestingly enough, I work, I'm doing some work right now in Holyoke, and they are under a food service management company. So what we find that it's not impossible to sell to the contract companies. It's just that I think that there's more steps involved. However, a lot of times those are larger districts. And so you could end up having a bigger contract, and it could be more exposure and more business. Self-operated food service, I think that is probably the easiest way to just, if you're just getting your feet wet, start with a self-op, and then potentially look at food service management companies down the line.
Thanks, Barrett. And one of the ways that you can usually tell is by going onto your school district's webpage or the districts that you are thinking about perhaps working with. And every school district does have food services listed within within the administration. So in addition to the superintendent's office or the business office or busing, food services is also a webpage on your school's site, and there's contact information for respective directors there. So schools buy local food in a variety of different ways. They certainly get direct purchases from farmers. They also get a good amount of food through local food hubs or from conventional distributors. So the food's got to get there somewhere. I know very few schools that are growing and sustaining their full food service operations through what might be grown in a school garden or at a farm that's, right next door. And so understanding that schools are buying food that's coming to them from outside sources, there are some procurement regulations that are involved. So per federal and state regulations, these are public dollars that are going towards making delicious school meals, but they still need to have transparency in the transaction or in the process. So if you're planning to sell to a school, a one-time purchase that's under $10,000 anytime between July 1st and June 30th, which is the state's fiscal year, if a school reaches out to you and wants to buy from you, they will just have to set up a purchase order, and you can sell directly to them without a solicitation. If there's going to be any kind of recurring purchase that's happening for up to $100,000 over the course of that, again, July 1 to June 30, the schools are going to send out a request for quotes. And that is a simple piece of paperwork that would go out to you and at least two other vendors to get pricing and to make sure that public dollars are being spent wisely and with just, with a farm or with a food, business that is providing the product that's being requested in a timely fashion. And, there's transparency in how much it would cost. There's one other threshold that if schools are planning to spend more than $100,000 on food from any one particular vendor, most generally this is used when schools are working with distributors or food hubs. They would send out a request for proposals or an invitation to bid, and that is a much more cumbersome contracting process that is, publicly announced statewide that would allow any number of businesses to respond to. But for the vast majority of direct farm to school sales, where the farmer is delivering directly or the food business is delivering directly to schools, we really see micro purchases or the request for quotes being a really successful model because it fosters a quicker transaction, a quicker, decision making point, and involves a heck of a lot less paperwork. And so, with those in mind, with that procurement strategy, the price and quality is definitely of consideration. Schools have to decide how the food is getting to them. Do they have the ability to go pick up from the farm, or do they really need the farm to deliver to them? Um, if they're looking for a simple substitution, like we're looking for peeled and cut butternut squash versus, we're looking specifically for this one particular type of, hot sauce, for example. Those can be things that are built into that type of solicitation. Schools have to figure out this is not necessary for raw products like ground beef or the butternut squash that you see on the screen, but more for any minimally processed or made products like baked goods. They do have to meet a meal pattern requirement. So, for example, any grains have to be 51% whole grain. White bread is not eligible to be sold to schools, for example. And then, schools have to figure out, like, do we have the labor to handle the product? Peeled and cut butternut squash is a really great option for schools that, peeling and cutting butternut squash is pretty labor intensive. And when you're thinking about serving 400 students at lunchtime, you may not have the time to be managing or manipulating with that product. But, there are also food safety requirements that different schools may require, like Commonwealth quality standards or GAP certification, depending on your operation. Certainly USDA, USDA slaughtering, and in the case of beef, and in any case, and I think that they're also looking for if the types of products that they might be able to source for you will help sell more meals or get more students to participate or teachers to come down and buy lunch. Going with known entities that students might be eating outside of school are compelling opportunities for them to bring those food items and into the schools. We've seen a lot of success with that with different types of produce or farms that are around the corner, as well as, like the hot sauce I mentioned, or a bakery that folks might be excited about. Schools are always looking for opportunities to educate students, like through our Harvest of the Month program and otherwise. If you haven't been in a school cafeteria in a long time, they can be calm or raucous environments, but anyway, schools are really looking for, how do we break up the monotony of a school lunch cafeteria? And so sometimes having a farmer, meet the farmer event during school lunch where kids can meet the farmer or the fisherman who might have raised the food that's on their tray is exciting and creates some real fun lunchtime table topics. So those can also be fun events, depending on if that's something that you are interested in for your business, because that can also help promote, retail marketing for when, Abby comes home from school and is like, I met Farmer Lonnie today, and did you know that her farm is in town, and I want to go see those cows, and guess what? We could buy their eggs. Those kinds of relationships can really amplify if parents are hearing that kind of demand from their students. And then one last consideration is the state and federal requirements. So I've talked a little bit much, but Lonnie, do you want to share more from your perspective as far as like what it's been like to work with schools? You certainly have, you've primarily been wholesaling, but what's it meant to you as a business and to you as a farm? And, what are you really looking, what would you say to your peers who are considering selling to schools and what they should think about and consider?
I've actually enjoyed listening to you talk, so you can keep going. No, it's been a great relationship. For us, it's exciting to be a part of it. I mean, the first school that we got to work with was Belchertown, which is our hometown. And, like Barrett had said about my daughter, goes to school there. So it was just really exciting for her too, to be, that day that, the tacos are being made or whatever, the meal of the day was with the ground beef or with the beef stew. She kind of seemed like a little bit of a celebrity because it was like everyone's like, "I'm gonna go to your meat, Bailey," and it was just really fun. It was enjoyable. We do enjoy it. Um, it's been a great relationship. You know, it's exciting to be able to get our product out, show more people. what we do. Like I said, we're new to this. Or I should say I'm new to raising beef and doing the farming end of it, but it's been good. I mean, the relationship that I've had with the three different districts has been fantastic. Everybody is excited about the products. I mean, we try to keep the prices to a point where it's something that seems appealing, and affordable. And and for me, knowing that it's feeding the kids, like that excites me. Like I look forward to knowing that they're not getting the frozen patties. They're getting fresh ground beef that we process every month, and everything that they'll order. Say, just the other day I had somebody order, and they'll get it delivered within 3 weeks, and then that'll be on their menu the next week. So it's really excited that it's that fresh, and it's processed, and consumption is not it's not lingering for months. It's not sitting in a freezer. It's just, you can't get any fresher in my mind. It excites me. And I know that, the other two districts have done some really fun things with it. The one thing that, for people thinking about wanting to get involved with it as far as a farmer, like you had said before, discussing the parameters of how are you going to pick up, or do you need us to deliver? Those are all really key points to seeing how this is going to work. Because, when I pick up for our farm and stuff, for because I stock our store, we have a couple of other businesses in town that use our product as well in their menus. There's a lot of moving parts, and we want to make sure that when it's picked up, it stays frozen, and it makes its destination the same way I picked it up, because we want to make sure that it's safe, it stays, nothing's thawing, we don't want anything spoiling. But everybody's worked really great with us. I mean, we've enjoyed it. Look forward to being able to do more. Um,
And Lonnie, do you mind
Financially,
sharing how some of your school-based orders kind of balance the cow compared to your retail sales?
like, you mean like what we get from it? I see it. Sorry, had a little bit of a brain fart there. Yes. So, for instance, like this month, we had a customer, one of the other school districts called and was like, "Oh, I need X amount of ground beef," and I got so excited, because that meant that I could send an extra animal, because I have Christmas coming up. So we have a lot of like other specialty cuts that need to be, you know, supplied, but I don't necessarily need that volume of ground beef. So it helps offset, what we need for the store and the retail for us to be able to supply to the school. So it it balances things out for us, so we can offer more to our home-based customers, and nothing goes to waste. You know, it's great.
Yeah, schools aren't, calling up for, 1,000 pounds of rib tips,
Yes.
they're steak
I-
tips. They're
oh,
calling up for
And the
five
kids would the kids would be excited for that, though. If that
I'm
was the
sure they
case, I'd be
would.
like, I want to be a sub teacher that day.
Yeah. Yeah.
Get in on that. But yeah, no, they're definitely not. They're looking for ground beef, beef stews, especially this time of the year. The stew beefs they were popular, and chilies and things of that nature that you can make in large volume to supplying to your students. So yeah.
Yeah, and I would say, Barrett chime in here too, but a lot of school nutrition directors, we are all becoming more and more aware of the industrial supply chain and
Mhm, mhm.
really wanting to eliminate risk and eliminate, potential pitfalls of that kind of system. And so when
Yeah.
you're able to partner directly with a farm that is raising animals well, and it's being processed, and the supply chain is so short, as far as from being raised
Yes.
in Belchertown, being processed, and then back in town within a matter of
It's peace of mind.
yeah,
It
absolutely.
really is. I mean, I can't tell you how many emails I would get every day with recalls. Because massive farms, you've got diced chicken made in one warehouse. Now this has listeria, but it's in thousands of products nationwide. And so this is peace of mind. It's just here to here. You know, so for me, I mean, I think I would rather, as a when I was a food service director, serve less beef, serve better. That's it, you know, and make it work.
That's right. And so, Barrett, do you want to talk a little bit about how you chose to menu the Austin Ridge Acres beef? Because, Lonnie
Sure.
wasn't supplying the district with hamburgers every day or
Right.
that quantity of hamburgers for every day. Like, how did you go about, making your, plan
Making
for local beef and
sure.
yeah.
We basically looked at, so originally this relationship began when we received the Mass Farm to School grant, for the Northeast grant. So we looked at what we could,
Technically, it was federal funding. That was
federal funding.
federal local Foods for Schools grant that we supported school spending. Yeah.
So we knew what funds we had for the year, and we had the price from Lonnie, and I said, all right, you know, we have 5 schools, we can serve this, you know, at each school once a month. And then as we got into the second year, we actually were able to serve it a lot more. We could do 2 meals. You know, I did the stew meat at 2 of our schools where I had culinarians that I knew could handle the stew beef properly and cook it down, because that does take a considerable amount of time to get it tender. But other than that, I mean, you just you decide how much you can use it and make it work. You know, so for us, like I said, it was once a month and then twice a month, and then sometimes at the end of the year we ended up having a little bit, you know, more, and they're like, all right, just local beef all month long.
Yeah. And, to Barrett's point, like different school nutrition directors, they're excited to offer local foods. They are not necessarily asking local farmers to replace and provide local food for absolutely every single meal that they're serving, because financially they may or may not be able to really handle that financially, with the low reimbursement rate. And, with the Harvest of the Month program, the requirement for participating in that, schools, really, they pledge to serve local food, that local crop, like an apple or like a butternut squash or an apple or a pear, that kind of thing, at least twice a month. And so if you're able to have conversations with a school director um, around volume and frequency, that can give you a better sense of if that would be a district that could be a good fit for you. Because as much as we want local food on the menu in every meal, as much as possible, that is not the reality with our federal reimbursement rate. And there's a lot of opportunity for, the strategic menu items to really help build scale and capacity over time, instead of going from, yeah, like once a month can turn into twice a month and maybe 3 times a month. And we've seen some districts, with different produce items slowly be able to switch to, okay, we'll only have Massachusetts apples, in the fall. And then suddenly they're able to start adding on local apples for longer periods of time, because they can also be more price competitive than Washington State apples, depending on the time of year, which is what we really want. Um, at risk of going on, because I'm already noticing the time. Again, if you have questions, please pop them into the Q&A function. We're happy to answer them as we're going through. But yeah, we're also excited to talk a little bit about that solicitation for quotes. So any purchases that would be less than $100,000 that a school might want to make over the course of a school year, they'll likely send out this, what looks like on the screen in front of you. It's a spreadsheet, but it's part of a multi-page document that's called a request for quote form. And so it's, Mass Farm to School developed this template in conjunction with the Department of Education's financial management team. And that's the team that audits all school nutrition departments around the state to make sure that they're spending state and federal resources appropriately. So we feel pretty confident that this template works both on the transactional side and on the audit side for school nutrition directors. But what it is like, it can really be structured to award vendors based on the best price or for individual products or for all products. So if Barrett was looking to get ground meat, stew meat, and, you know, maybe a different kind of meat, like, you know, she could have put that into this request for quote as far as the product and description. You can also, like, schools might also be able to define the geographic preference of where they would be looking for food to come from. So they could use a town, they could use a county, they could use a state, they could use a region or a mile radius. Those are now allowed for schools to define when they're looking for product. So that could allow this to be an advantageous opportunity if they're saying we are looking for ground beef that is grown and raised within 30 miles of our town, which, um, as Barrett would then be able to send out, or the school nutrition director then sends out to at least 3 different farms that might be able to handle that. Barrett, do you want to talk a little bit about how you chose to structure your request for quotes? And then Lonnie, you
Sure.
can talk a little bit about, like, what was it like getting this attachment on an email and then having to fill it out?
So first and foremost, I wanted to make it easy for, because I sent it out to 3 different farms, and I wanted to make it easy. So I did most of the legwork in the sense of this is what we're looking for, and I believe it was just the ground beef and the stew, and I guesstimated at our pound usage for the year, and essentially, I knew that one of the farms that I sent it out was a much smaller farm. They might not be able to get that information back, but I wanted to stay within. I mean, we're lucky. We're in rural Belchertown, and I had 3 farms to send it to. So that being said, I tried to fill it out as much as I could. Then I sent it over to Lonnie but basically I think it was just for the pricing.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
I'm
Which
going to
was
pull up the actual document now, so forgive me as I'm switching screens,
Okay.
because I can show you what the Word document looks like, just to um, demystify this thing. So do you see the Word document in front of me?
Mhm.
So this is the sample, which allows the school district to really customize anything that's in yellow, that really highlights anything that they would be customizing for the school district. Sorry, go ahead, Lonnie.
No, that's okay. For us, it was pretty simple. I mean, it was like Barrett had mentioned, she put in what she would suspect that she was going to need for a month. I then knew like what I could accommodate because I knew how many animals I had. And it was pretty simple. It was just deciding, price points. Obviously, it would be more of a wholesale price than retail. So it was just an easy thing to determine whether or not, you know, price that she would kind of get excited about. Get excited about and want to do this with us. So it's basically what it came down to for myself. It was a no-brainer to be a part of it and to jump on board. It was just wanting to make sure that I put it at a price point that we could make this work for her and for us, and then working out the details as to, getting it to her, which was really easy. I mean, I would shoot her a message, be like, hey, I'm picking up this day. I should be at the schools by this time. And that's it. Like it was, and then emailed her over an invoice. And
Yep.
within a couple of weeks, it was, the exchange was complete.
Yeah, and I will say, like, some schools do take up to 30 days to process their invoices, but a lot of
Mm.
self-op schools are faster than that. It's just a matter of getting the paperwork processed
Yeah.
through their central office and voted on by school committee. Um, and Lonnie was great too because she did do deliveries to each school, but I think there were some days where we may not have a huge delivery for some of our smaller schools, and I just say, hey, just drop it off at our main hub of a school, and we'll distribute it from there.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Even as far as the payment goes, like with the 3 different schools, like everything, as far as like you expect there to be a little bit of a lapse in payment, which is fine because it kind of has to go through its channels of everybody, receiving it, then, the payout, which we deal with another facet of our business that we take manure out of a school, and it's the same thing. Like you figure it's going to take at least 3 weeks. So to me, as long going into it, like you expect that. So to me, 3 weeks or even 60 days, like it's not terrible. I mean, yes, to get going, it makes it financially difficult because they have the processing fee. That's the biggest burden for a farmer is that initial like cost of processing the animal, because raising them, we've already done that, like we've already put in the time, we've already make sure that we're growing, the food that they need and they're on their diets. But it was that initial first processing where it can hit you, but it is, you get past that first month and then it's kind of becomes smooth sailing. So
Yeah. So depending on how cash flow, what your
yeah,
cash flow reserves are,
right.
schools can be a really great wholesale customer because they're gonna pay you. There just might be
Absolutely.
a delay. Yeah.
Absolutely. Yep.
And I also wanted in this sample request for quotes, I just wanted to highlight again, like there is a Buy American provision. Schools are supposed to be buying domestic, USA grown and made foods. And it is so successful in schools being able to buy more local foods where it's clearly traceable to the farm of origin that allays those concerns about recalls, that reminds folks that schools are the biggest restaurant in town and can be contributors to the local food system. So it's even in some of the solicitation and then contract language for you. So
Perfect.
okay, let me switch back over to the PowerPoint. Um, so as we're talking, things to consider when you're selling to schools, or if you want to sell to schools, is they're reliable wholesale accounts. School years, can lend themselves to different crops or food products better than others. But many school districts also do summer food service programs, especially in your higher density communities where there are more students that are living in food insecure households or families that are on SNAP benefits. So there can be these types of wholesale opportunities year round. Although you should also, take note of when there plan to be school vacations or holidays, because that may disrupt your delivery schedule or your ordering schedule, depending on what you're making or planning to sell to schools. The bread truck will not be showing up on Veterans Day on November 11th because it's a federal holiday and schools will be closed when some restaurants might be open. Schools also are increasingly looking for opportunities for farm field trips or other types of relationships like that meet the farmer event type of opportunity. More Mass Farm to School, we're currently engaged in, we're working with 20 different educators around the state, developing social studies lessons that are specifically tied to the state's civics curriculum that are entirely around the food system. So how, can students really be learning about nutrition policy that is developed, through state and federal lawmakers that end up impacting our local farmers. And we already talked about the payment cycle or purchase orders. I will say, I'm glad for Lonnie that the schools that she's working with have a pretty speedy payment process. And, that is something to really clarify with any school customer that you are entering into contract with or, entering into business with, to have a sense of that so that you have a better idea of cash flow.
Absolutely.
So I had a question in the chat or in the Q&A that is farm to school a meaningful channel for farmers only doing produce and vegetables. And I would say, if I think so if this is a produce farmer that, raises fruits and vegetables, yes, schools can certainly be excellent partners for you. Different school districts are working with their partner districts to get asparagus in the month of May, understanding that that's a very seasonable crop that is not going to be, they don't want to get and shouldn't be getting asparagus from Peru, at other times of the year when it's not locally available. Certainly, I would say orchard fruits are in high demand, especially pears and apples, because of, kids really love fruit and they want to be eating a lot of fruit, and fruit is required to be offered at both breakfast and lunch. and other produce items. Like certainly a lot of schools have salad bars. You know, schools are looking for minimally processed, you know, food sometimes. Like maybe they're looking for pre-made carrot sticks or peeled and cut butternut squash. So depending on your farm enterprise, you may be thinking about what ways you can make sure foods are washed, cut, and packed, if that can be easier for your school customer, or you know, at the very least, have a conversation with what the school in your community that you're looking to sell to would be ready to handle. Because I do know some schools in Massachusetts that absolutely get, you know, uh, black crates full of dirty root vegetables, and they have staff that are ready to wash it. And for many of the kitchens that I was working in Springfield for a number of years, that we didn't have the space to do that in some of the kitchens that were running in buildings that were made in the 1800s. So those are considerations, and please continue to put questions in the chat. So other questions also include, like, if you already wholesale, because schools are looking for wholesale size quantities usually, and it might just be like a 25-pound box of something. Or Barrett, what size meat were you ordering? Like what size meat packs were you ordering from Lonnie?
Lonnie was able to get 10-pound packages for us, which was great. You know, because otherwise it's usually like 1 pound from more local distributors. So was it 10-pound or 5-pound, Lonnie?
No, you guys had 10 pounds.
That's what I thought. Yeah,
Yep.
so that was phenomenal because it thaws really quickly. And you know, we often would go through 100 pounds at a serving. I mean, you know, a meal. And I was going to say the other thing, and I don't know if this answers the question, if it's that was in the Q&A, but we use local maple syrup, we use local honey. So there are a lot of avenues of local products that can be used. You know, it's not just your typical apples, pears. You know, we had peaches that came from a farm. In fact, the farmer had been selling to Belchertown for years, and I basically said, I will take your entire lot. Done. You know, and so for the farmer, they're thinking that's great. I've sold my entire lot of peaches for the season. You know, and maybe they keep some for farmers market or for themselves, but that's the power of a school district. You know, you can work really closely with farmers, and I've had farmers grow stuff specifically for us for the next year, you know, and so that's really a nice relationship too.
Barrett, thank you for that reminder, because yeah, as you're heading into the winter months, now is beginning to be the time that schools are thinking about the types of orders that they'll be putting forward next school year. So in the landscape of public school meals, food service departments have to have a plan of what they are going to ask the federal government for. And by March, they have to have a plan of a certain amount of money that they'll be using for their fresh produce allocation, for any meat or cheese allocations that they might be getting from the federal government. But that does not cover all of the food that schools need to serve school meals. But they are already thinking about, you know, what they could be using in the school year ahead. And that can really align well with any type of crop planning that you might be doing, or, you know, forward thinking around, you know, your yields for different, you know, other items. If it's, you know, especially your you know, meat products, it takes a long time to raise a cow, you know, so Lonnie isn't going to be ready to, you know, serve an extra 50,000 pounds of meat, you know, next month.
No.
That's really a conversation over time with those directors, going from once a month to twice a month, or so on and so forth. And I do know a number of school districts that do plan, like, okay, great, we plan to use your tomatoes starting in September, and as long as you'll have them, kind of thing. Whereas some other school districts are definitely going more the route of, great, maple and honey are awesome year-round sweeteners. They have sugar limitation requirements that are with the federal government. But again, like the amount of maple syrup portion that they might have on for different menu items can definitely be managed by portion size depending on the dish. And most schools I know, their highest participation meals tend to be breakfast for lunch, where maple syrup is also on the menu with sausage links or pancakes, you know, that kind of thing. My kid is definitely one of those, looking forward to the breakfast for lunch menu each month. And then I would also say, like, I think I mentioned this a little bit earlier before, but there can be a real marketing benefit if you're working with schools. Schools might be able to help promote your business. They certainly want to promote that they're sourcing local foods, and they might be able to include, you know, community highlights or a vendor highlight in communications they may be making on social media, certainly to the students as they're coming through the lunch line, but in family newsletters and that kind of thing. Yeah, and you already heard that, you know, Bailey was getting the accolades for the farmer celebrity lunch days at Belchertown. All right. Oh my gosh, the hour goes so quickly. So other things to consider is delivery and logistics. If you require minimum orders to be able to deliver as a farmer, that's important for you to know, as far as like miles on the road, time that you're, you know, using your vehicles to be delivering, considering the parameters of when kitchens are open or able to receive deliveries. You know, the condition of the products they're delivering, as I mentioned before, some schools are really looking for minimally processed foods, as that might be like lightly peeled and cut produce, in addition to, you know, Barrett was getting the ground beef. It wasn't, you know, coming in at hanging, you know, at hanging weight off the carcass for it to be butchered down in the school kitchen. And then again, since schools are planning menus in advance, you know, do you have products, or are you looking at growing items that schools might want to consider in response to an unpredictable growing season? We saw that during COVID, schools that were still running school nutrition programs became a really viable option for farmers that heavily relied on restaurant sales, because schools are still open and serving meals regularly, and the national supply chain completely collapsed and they weren't able to get food grown in California. But a lot of Massachusetts farmers that were already wholesaling and able to deliver were able to step into that absence. So if you're interested in starting sales inquiries with Massachusetts schools, please contact me. We're happy to help you. And you would really want to look to speak with a food service director, or consider working through a local distributor. You'll want to make it personal, provide a brief profile of your farm, offer your pricing sheets. That really helps, you know, schools determine if it's something that could be feasible or not, and provide them updates on different product availability, especially if you're providing seasonal, you know, foods. Like basil is not going to be widely available in November in Massachusetts, unless you have a, you know, very large whole scale greenhouse operation. As I mentioned before, Mass Farm to School is working on different promotional opportunities that are really enticing schools to both buy local and to recognize the farms from which they're sourcing foods. So we have a monthly competition called the Terrific Tray Competition, run through the Department of Education. And it's both a social media campaign to demystify what school meals are looking like and can look like, as well as promote the local farms and communities that are, you know, serving local foods, and, you know, giving the farmers credit for the delicious products they're raising. And new this month actually is we're putting forward what's called the Northeast Food for Schools Challenge. And throughout Massachusetts, schools will be competing against each other to prove that they're using local foods on their menus. And that requires product traceability from the origin of where that food is being grown in order to count as a local item. So Lonnie's beef that's getting into local schools will 100% count for dollar for what what the school district might have spent. And this is a social, you know, this is a campaign to raise more awareness around certainly what schools are already spending in the local food economy, because they are. And we're also challenging distributors to provide greater transparency and where the food they're selling is coming from. So if you're interested in learning more about those, the links will be available on this PowerPoint after today's presentation, along with the recording, but you can use your phone camera to capture the QR code and it will take you to those websites. A little bit around, and oh my gosh, we're closing in. So a little bit around, schools are purchasing local food during the federal local food for schools program in Massachusetts. We called it the Northeast Food for Schools program. And of that $3.5 million, only 13% was spent directly with farmers. But they, we had $3.5 million that were going on local food products, which included, the top seller was apples. There was also lettuce and then milk and beef and carrots. And then, a good quarter of the products were also other things like seafood and mushrooms and, maple syrup, as Barrett had mentioned. So look for our Northeast Food for Schools report that's coming out later in the month that really highlights and details some of the ways schools were using federal nutrition incentives to be partnering more with local farms. And we are here to certainly assist you as farmers and food producers if you want to look at what school sales might be right for your business model. We can help you identify different appropriate products or connect you with potential school customers, and certainly equip you with some of the things and marketing resources that we have for different farm to school efforts. We're also available to help with any school solicitations. If you're interested in getting listed in our database, if you're looking to be added to our local food directory, please consider adding yourself onto our local food map. We do ask for producers and farmers to be able to provide transparency around where they're sourcing from farms. We know that Cumberland Farms in Massachusetts is not actually a farm. It is a gas station. And so just because farm might be in a name, we also want to have, greater understanding of the food that you're growing and selling so that there's real integrity in the supply chain. And we work on a statewide coalition to provide more resources so that schools can be serving more local food in schools. And so if you are not already, we encourage you to join our coalition. We do have active legislation in the House Education Committee right now to support a farm to school bill that would provide grant opportunities for students to come out on farm field trips or provide professional development for educators and school nutrition staff, as well as it has language to provide an incentive so that school nutrition departments would get a rebate back on dollars that they spent buying local food. So with that, I see a couple more questions coming up in the chat or in the Q&A. Please drop them in the Q&A as you have them. But if you would like to get in touch with any of us, our contact information is up here. And I want to really thank Barrett and Lonnie for being on our call today. I love that you were able to bring a really personal perspective to this business transaction that is about like, all right, how am I moving cows and product and how am I getting ground beef so I can be making these menu items? So thank you for that. I'm going to read a couple of questions in the chat as they're coming through, but yeah. All right, awesome. So it looks like someone who wants to follow up directly. Look forward to connecting with you. And as I mentioned, this webinar has been recorded, so it will be available offline in the next day or so. And for any of the attendees who registered but weren't able to join us, both the recording and the slides will be available after the fact. So you can share this on to any of your colleagues who weren't able to join us today. Lonnie or Barrett, any closing remarks for the folks as we've already exceeded our 1 hour?
I was just the one question is, how do you reach out to the school and the Holden Fresh Fruit and Produce in Chelsea? And I wondered, did she want to get in touch with the local school there?
Yeah, I think that based on registration, I'll probably follow up with Jamie Lynn.
Yeah.
After the fact,
Yeah.
to see, what they're able to do for schools in that area,
Yeah,
what deliveries might be able to provide.
Well, thank you for having me. It's lovely. And, any questions, people can always email me and I'm happy to answer any of them.
Thank you, Barrett. And if any of you have schools where you're looking for chef educators to come in, have share Barrett's contact information to your school nutrition director, because she's a real pro who's bringing more culinary skills to school
Thank you.
kitchens across the state.
Yeah,
She
and we
brings
do.
a lot. She brings a lot of knowledge to the farmer too. I
Thank
learned
you.
a lot of I learned a lot of new cuts and whatnot that I'd had no idea what beef can offer that she shared with me.
Awesome.
That's so great to hear. Yeah, it's a little bit of like, okay, this is what I'm growing. How do you need
Yeah.
it? Kind of thing, right?
Yeah. She was like, "Do you carry?" And I'm like, "I don't know." Like, but I'm gonna find out for you. But yeah. Well, thank you for
Yeah,
having me as well.
yeah.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Lenny. And we really appreciate how you've really risen to the call to be able to serve the number of students that you are throughout Western Mass. It means a lot. And
Absolutely.
another, beef farmer's kid, I certainly can attest to how that difference, when it's local farm raised.
Absolutely.
It's really delicious. So thank you both. Have a wonderful
Thank you.
afternoon, everyone.
You too.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye.